Let's get started. My name is Tony Landolt. One more time, I am the operations manager for our retail stores, and just super happy and glad that you're able to join with us tonight as we talk about how to close your swimming pool for the season. And with us, giving us the great information is Randy Darby. He's our BioGuard representative, and Randy's been doing this for many years, and I've had the privilege and blessing to do this with him for the last 10 at the Pool and Spa House. Randy, it's been 10 years. This marks number 10 for our winter closing school, so kind of a milestone for me, but nonetheless, this is just a time to give you a lot of great information. Again, if you have questions, please post those in the chat box down below, or if you're on the phone and don't have a chance to do that, we'll catch you at the very end. So Randy, with all that said, thank you for your time tonight. Randy Darby, BioGuard, please have your way tonight. You're on.
Right. Thanks a lot, Tony, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. In the past, we used to do these, like Tony said, in the stores, but with the whole coronavirus issues, we've had to take this remotely, and we appreciate you attending. And as Tony said, if you've got any questions, just type them in the chat. We'll answer them as we go through. This will probably last about 35, 45 minutes, depending on if you have any questions or not. I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm not a chemist. I'm not going to be breaking down molecular structures and things. We're going to keep it real simple and hopefully give you some good information on how to close your pool properly and have it ready to go next spring. So let's go ahead and get started. And I think what I'm going to do, just so we get everybody on mute, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody for right now. I'll put you back on, Tony, just so we don't get any background noise. But here's really our three main objectives of winterizing a pool. And the first two are really pretty self-explanatory. We want to make sure that next spring, when you open up your pool, it is basically ready to go. It's crystal clear. There's no algae, there's no bacteria growing. Maybe you got a little bit of debris on the bottom of the pool, but it's basically ready to go from a water chemistry standpoint. And then lastly, we want to protect the pool surfaces, the plumbing, the equipment from especially freeze damage. And you know, the Portland, if you wouldn't mind, if you could put yourself on mute, that would really help the background noise, please. But we want to protect the pool surfaces, the plumbing, the equipment from freeze damage. And with the Portland area being kind of, you know, sometimes we get some hard freeze, sometimes we don't. We'll talk a little bit about how to protect the pool from freeze damage, which is important as well. So those are really our three main objectives. And get my slide to move here. And this is what we really don't want to happen next spring. We don't want to pull that cover off your pool and have the green monster sitting in the backyard. This can be very expensive, very time consuming to clean up. So that's really, from a water chemistry standpoint, that's what we want to avoid. And kind of first things first, one of the things that we recommend is waiting to close your pool until the water temperature in your pool gets down below 65 degrees. If you close the pool too soon and the water's too warm, the winterizing products that we're going to put in won't last as long. And so we want to make sure they last as long as possible. And the colder the water, the better. We've got to be getting, you know, especially if you obviously don't have a heater on your pool or have turned your heater off, the water should be getting pretty close to that 60, 65 degrees. Typically, the best time to close your pool is late September to the middle of October. But we want that water a little bit colder. If it's not below 65 degrees yet, go ahead and just treat the pool like you have all summer. You know, obviously you're probably not going to be swimming at, 70 degrees, but keep checking your chlorine level, keep the pH balanced. And then once we get that water temperature down below 65 degrees, we're ready to start the winterization process. We also don't want to cover up any problems. So if you've got green algae or black algae or mustard algae now, or a cloudy pool, we want to fix that right now before we close the pool up. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to clean up next spring. All right, so once we've gotten to the point where the water temperature is down below 65 degrees, now we're ready to start preparing the pool for winter. And really the first step is getting the water properly balanced. Hopefully you've been doing this all summer, keeping the pH in balance, the total alkalinity, calcium hardness. If you use optimizer in your pool, you want to get that in the proper range. The reason for this is that if you think about it, that water is going to be sitting in the pool for months. Maybe you're not checking it very often. We want to make sure that water is perfectly balanced, because if it's out of balance, it can actually cause some damage to the pool surfaces, plumbing, equipment. So we want to get it properly balanced. So we ideally recommend bring a water sample into one of the 4 pool and spa house stores. And probably the most critical thing that we're going to keep an eye on, obviously all 4 of these, but especially the pH. If what happens with the pH, some of you probably remember from school, the pH scale is basically a scale that tells us if the water is either acidic or alkaline. We want to have the pH between 7.2 and 7.6, whether it's during the summer, whether it's during the winter. That's kind of the sweet spot to make sure the pool is most comfortable. And then the other couple things, the alkalinity helps keep the pH more stable. The one thing that we actually elevate a little bit higher than we do during the summer is the calcium hardness. Calcium's kind of a funny mineral. It's actually more soluble in cold water. And so when that happens, we need to have a little bit more calcium hardness in the water, or that can be hard on our pool surfaces especially. Again, correct any existing problems. We'll also test for any metals like copper and iron in the water. If there's any copper and iron in the water, those can leave stains over the winter. Copper creates kind of a bluish green stain. Iron, kind of a rusty brown stain. There's some products that we can put in that will prevent staining over the winter. So get the water perfectly balanced. And then we'll move to the next step, which is probably the least fun part of winterizing a pool, or even maintaining a pool just in general, but the cleaning part. We want to get the pool as clean as possible. The idea behind this is the cleaner the water is, the longer the winterizing chemicals will last. So we want to skim the surface if you've got any debris laying on the surface of the water. We also want to brush the pool. Get your nylon brush out, brush the walls, the bottom of the pool. That'll get any algae, biofilms, anything that might be growing on the walls out into the water, where either the filter can remove it or the chemicals can remove it. Vacuum the pool. Again, we want to get the pool as clean as possible so that, again, the winterizing chemicals last the longest time. There's a couple of other things that we can chemically clean. If you've got a little bit of a water line buildup, there's products like Off the Wall that will clean the water line. So if you've got like a scale deposit or just kind of a scum line around the pool, we want to get that cleaned off so it doesn't harden over the winter. And then the other thing, this is probably the most critical time of year to chemically clean your filter, whether it's a sand filter or a cartridge filters. We've got a couple of different filter cleaners, so check with the staff at the pool and spa house. They'll point you in the right direction, depending on if you've got hard water or soft water. They'll recommend either Strip Quick or Clean It. If you use SoftSwim as your sanitizer in your pool, they'll recommend a SoftSwim filter cleaner. But we want to chemically clean the sand, chemically clean the filter, so that any debris that's on those filters doesn't harden over the winter, be difficult to remove next spring. Also, if you've had your pool a while, one of the questions we get asked quite often is how long should the sand last? If you've got a sand filter, the typical life of sand in a sand filter is around 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So if you've gone over 5 years, you might consider being prepared to change your sand next spring. Keeping the filter clean or changing the filter media can really help the performance of the water quality when you're using the pool in the spring and summer. So we get the filter clean, get the water line clean. If any of you have a salt water system where you've got an actual chlorine generator on your pool, this is also a good time to chemically clean the chlorine generator cell. And so make sure when you come into the store, you let them know that you've got a chlorine generator, and they'll definitely recommend putting a solution in the chlorine generator cell that will clean it. It's pretty common. That slide at the bottom of The picture at the bottom of my slides, the one on the left is what the chlorine generator cell should look like. The one on the right is one that's been all scaled up. That's pretty common. So we want to make sure that we get any of that scale removed going into winter. And by the way, if you do have a chlorine generator, we typically want to turn that off, totally turn it off during the winter. Most of the units do not operate. They don't produce chlorine when the water temperature is below about 55 degrees. So we definitely want to turn that off for the winter and save it for next spring and summer. Again, if you do have any questions, just type them into the chat. We'll answer those as we go through. All right, so we took care of the water balance, the housekeeping chores. Pretty simple so far, and really the next thing that we're going to do, we're actually ready to put in the winterizing chemicals. And so if you've got a traditional chlorine pool, a saltwater pool, we're going to put in a winter kit. And there's two sizes of winter kits, one that treats up to 24,000 gallons, one that treats up to 12,000 gallons. And we'd rather round up. So say if you've got an 18,000 gallon pool, we put the whole 24,000 gallon kit in. If you've got a 8,000 gallon above ground pool, you put the whole 12,000 gallon kit in. We'd rather overdose than underdose. And so it's all based on the gallonage of your pool. If you're unsure on what the gallonage of your pool is, just get the dimensions for us. We just need to know the length, the width, the shallow end depth, and the deep end depth, and we can calculate the gallonage of your pool very accurately. So here's what's in the winter kits. There's really just two products. The first product that we're going to put in, this is a long-lasting winter shock treatment with chlorine. This is called the Arctic Blue Shock. It's a 2-pound bottle. You put in 1 2-pound bottle per 12,000 gallons of pool water. It's fast dissolving. You add it directly to the pool with the pump and filter operating. So if you've got a 20,000 gallon pool, you're going to put 2 bottles of this in. What this is going to do is it's going to oxidize and clarify the water and establish a fairly high chlorine level. Because again, we need this chlorine to last for a number of months during the winter and into the spring. So it's 1 bottle per 12,000 gallons of water. And then the second product that's in the kit, oh, I see we got a question there. So the question is, I have a 30,000 gallon. Yep, you got it exactly right. Get a large kit and a small kit, put both of them in. That's obviously would treat up to 36,000 gallons. And we'd, again, rather overdose it than underdose it. The other product that's in the kit, in the 12,000 gallon kit, there's a pint of the Arctic Blue algae protector. In the 24,000 gallon kit, there's a quart. And this is a long-lasting winter algicide that will prevent algae during the winter. All types of algae, green algae, black algae, mustard algae. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. We're putting in a winter chlorine shock treatment, and then we're putting in a winter algicide. And the question that people always ask us is, how long is this kit going to last? And it's kind of the $1 million question. It really depends on whether you cover the pool, what the water temperature was when you closed it up, was there much debris in the pool. Typically, if the water's cold, you put a good cover on the pool. We can go from, middle of October to maybe the end of April. It also depends on what kind of a winter we have. And I know I was reading some reports the other day for, pretty much the Northwest in general. They were talking about maybe a colder than normal winter. That's actually better from a chemistry standpoint. The colder the water is, the longer these winterizing chemicals last. Now, if for some reason we get a really mild winter, I would definitely recommend, bring a water sample into the pool and spa house, maybe in February, and just have them double check the chlorine level, just to make sure that we've got a good, strong chlorine level going into, March and April, and that it hasn't dissipated too quickly. Get to the next slide here. And also in the winter kit, there's a couple of money saving coupons as well. So you can pull those out and use those now or later. But those are the two main products that are in the winter kits. Now, there are a couple of other things that we can put in. If you've got a white plaster pool only, this is called an Arctic Blue floater. And inside this floater, this is basically a disposable chlorine floater that holds 3.5 pounds of chlorine tablets. And it slowly puts in a little bit more chlorine all winter, very, very slowly, just to keep the chlorine level up. We can't use this in vinyl or fiberglass pools. It's a little bit too strong and could bleach the liner or bleach the fiberglass. But in plaster pools, this just keeps a little extra trickle, a little extra protection going into the pool all winter. And then really the last product in all chlorine or saltwater pools is this product will protect the pool and the equipment from corrosion, scaling, staining. This is called Pool Closing Complete. And you put in one bottle up to 25,000 gallons of water. And this is really to protect the pool and the equipment during the winter. This is the last product that we put in, and this will get printed out on your computerized water analysis when you come in. And so really from a chemistry standpoint, if you've got a traditional chlorine pool or a saltwater pool, we're now done with the water chemistry aspect. It's really that simple. And then really it's up to you when we start getting some nice weather next spring, bring a water sample into the store. We may need to give it another little boost of winter shock. The thing that really causes the pools to go from clear to the green monster with green algae is when we run out of chlorine and when we run out of algicide. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. That, if we get a kind of a wet spring, maybe you forget about the pool a little bit, it's fairly easy for the pool to go from clear to green if we just kind of don't pay attention to it for a few weeks. And we want to prevent that from happening because it's pretty expensive to treat an algae bloom, and sometimes it might take a week or two to get rid of it as well. And then if we have anybody, yeah.
Sorry, we got one more question that might be pertinent to the previous slides. It says, I have a 13,000 gallon above ground pool. How much Arctic Blue? So I don't know if you want to speak to that before you move.
You bet. And so if you're kind of on the borderline, if you've got a 13,000 gallon pool, I probably would recommend getting a 24,000 gallon kit, putting half of it in now, and then saving the other half of it for early spring, because you're on the borderline, and maybe you won't need it, and maybe you will. I'd rather be cautious. I'd rather have that product available so that you could put it in next spring. And you know what? If you're lucky and we have a hard winter and you don't need it, just save it for next winter. It won't go bad. All right. So if we have anybody on here that's using SoftSwim in their pool, SoftSwim is a non-chlorine sanitizer. It's pretty popular in above ground pools, in some smaller in-ground pools. If you use SoftSwim in your pool, we're not going to use the winterizing kit. We're going to use the actual SoftSwim products. We're going to add the initial dose of A, which is the algicide. We want to get a good dose of algicide in. We're going to add 1 gallon of SoftSwim C, which is basically the shock treatment for SoftSwim. And then we're going to top off the SoftSwim B level to 50 parts per million. If you bring a water sample into the store, they'll help you tell you how much to put in to get the SoftSwim B level up to 50 parts per million. And then really the last thing, we'll put in what's called Natural Result, which is a product that prevents water line buildup over the winter. All right, so that we just covered really everything that you need to know about the water chemistry portion of it. Now we're going to dig into how to protect the pool from freeze damage. And there's really two methods of doing this. There's what we call the off-season pool care method in milder climates like Portland, Seattle, California, Northern California, where it may or may not freeze. That's the way most people winterize their pools here in at least in Western Oregon, Western Washington. If we go over to, say, Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, where they know freezing will occur, they do a little bit more preventative measures to prevent freeze damage over there. But here in the Portland metro area, where it's fairly mild, the main thing we're concerned with here is we don't want any water in the equipment or in the plumbing lines to not be moving when we get freezing air temperatures, because as you all know, if water freezes inside like your pump or filter, it expands it and it's going to break. So we either need to let the water continue to run. In fact, a lot of people just let the pump run 24/7, 365 days a year. That's fine. The other thing that people will do after they've added the chemicals, they've added all the chemicals to winterize the pool. Now they watch the weather report, and when we see that we're going to get close to freezing temperatures or below freezing temperatures, they run the pump to make sure that there's no chance of any water in the equipment, in the skimmer, that could freeze, expand, and break. And so, like it says in bullet point 4, no partial drain of equipment or removal. The equipment stays connected and operational. And that's probably the majority of what people do in the Portland metro area. In fact, Tony, what would you say? What do you think the percentage is of people that use this method?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think actually it's more common than most. I think this is probably a good maybe 60-70%. I think a good chunk of people just keep it simple.
Okay, because this is probably the least complicated method, but you obviously need to kind of pay attention if we get a power outage or something. If we, God forbid, got a power outage and freezing temperatures, then you're going to have to drain some water out of the equipment, and make sure that we don't get any water that could freeze and expand. The areas of the pool that we're concerned with about freeze damage is really the equipment, the skimmer, any plumbing lines that are above the ground, like on an above ground pool. We want to make sure that water is either drained if we have a power outage, or it's always moving when we get freezing temperatures. The other method, and as Tony indicated, maybe 30% of the people in the Portland area do the cold climate winterization of their equipment, where like in Eastern Oregon, where they know it's going to be freezing temperatures, they'll do a partial drain of the pool, get the water below the skimmer. In the case of an above ground pool, they'll actually remove the equipment, put it in the garage so it's protected for the winter. And typically there's no interim maintenance involved with this type of winterization. Now it is quite a bit more involved. We'll lower the water temperature in some cases below the return lines, for sure below the skimmer. If you've got an in-ground pool and you want to use this method, I would definitely check with whoever built your pool. Every pool builder has a little bit different directions on how to winterize their pool. So I definitely, especially if it's a new pool still under warranty, I would definitely check with the pool builder and see what their recommendation is. Some pool builders will have you drain the water down below the return, blow all the water out of the lines, where you use a shop vac in reverse or a compressor to get all the water out of the lines, and then you cap those lines, and then they'll have you fill the pool back up. Again, it really depends on the pool builder, but we'll plug the return inlets, again, not making sure that no water, the only water that's basically in the system is the water in the pool. We don't really care if the water in the pool freezes. We just don't want the water in the equipment or the return lines to freeze. We also need to protect the skimmer from freezing. So that picture in the top right, that's an in-ground pool, and that little blue thing that's going in the skimmer, it's actually called a gizmo that screws into the skimmer, so that when and if water gets into the skimmer, that will absorb the expansion. So if the water freezes in the skimmer, that'll absorb the expansion and the skimmer won't break. The picture on the bottom left, that's a picture of, there's some other devices on the market where you can actually put a cover over the skimmer face so water can't get in the skimmer. So a few different things, but we want to make sure that we protect that skimmer if the water is not going to be moving, so that there's no chance of it freezing. And then as far as the equipment, we want to drain all the water out of the equipment, turn the power off to the pump, turn the gas off to the heater, That picture in the middle where you've got an above ground pool with its equipment, you could disconnect the equipment, again, put it in the garage. You've got the water down below the skimmer. And then that pool's properly winterized with kind of the harsh climate winterization procedure. One thing to note on this slide on the bottom left, if you've got a sand filter with a multi-port valve, like you see there on the left, many of those valves have a winter setting. So if you are going to drain the water out of the equipment, put it on the winter setting. That takes the pressure off the gasket inside that valve, so it doesn't cause any damage to the valve. Let me just go back to that slide. So that's really the two methods of freeze protection. So definitely make sure that you're doing one or the other. And I see we've got another question here.
Yeah, just regarding heater, Randy, you kind of spoke to equipment in general, but regarding leaving water in the heater.
Yeah, we definitely want to make sure that it's okay to run. Let's see, I didn't think you're supposed to leave water in your heater lines. Well, you can have the water continuing to run through your heater. That's not going to hurt anything. Just turn the heater off. It's no problem running the water through the heater. Tony, anything you want to add there?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, it's you don't, to emphasize your point that you just made, you do not want to run your heater. Don't turn your heater on, even in the threat of freezing. The whole point is running water. So just to emphasize that, if there is a threat of freezing and you have not elected to completely drain everything, lower your water, cover it all, if you still have it either hooked up and whatnot, if there's a threat of freezing, do not turn it on. So just highlighting that.
Yeah. The other question, with the amount of rain we get throughout the winter, which is a good point, how do we ensure that water level stays below the skimmer? You're probably not going to ensure that. It is going to get, that's why we want to put one of those gizmos in the skimmer so that when water does get in the skimmer, if it were to freeze, that would absorb the expansion. And so and if we get a lot of rain, get a lot of snow, and we don't want the water overflowing out of the pool either. So you may need to pump some water out of the pool to keep that water level down. Because that's a real good point, especially if you had say you had a plaster pool and we let the water level get too high and it got up, just underneath the coping, and then it froze, and the water in the pools expanded a little bit. That could be a problem as well, because that expansion of the water in the pool going upwards on the coping, that could cause some damage as well. So you ask a good question. You definitely want to keep an eye on the water level and not let it get too high.
Randy, one more question too is asked regarding option one, winterizing option one, leaving the water where the pH can ruin your heater. So if it's not winterized per se, so it's uncovered and the equipment is still, it's not drained, water is flowing or able to flow. The question is what should you do with the water chemistry, specifically the pH, and how that can affect your equipment, such as your heater?
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely, that's why we're going to balance the water properly. And if, as Tony just indicated, if you leave the pool uncovered, you're definitely going to want to check the pH periodically and adjust it. But if you get all the water balance in the proper parameters, the alkalinity, the pH, and we get everything dialed in, and you put a good cover on the pool, you should have pretty minimal pH fluctuations throughout the winter. And if you're, and to be honest, if you're concerned with it, maybe once a month, bring a water sample into the store. And if we notice that the pH has gotten a little bit to the low side, we can add some pH increaser. But in most cases, 4 or 5 months, once we've got that water properly balanced, it's not going to fluctuate very much, because like I said, if you've got a good cover on your pool, which is kind of the next topic, is whether to cover or not cover your pool, what kind of a cover to put on the pool. There's really 3 types of covers. There's solid covers like you see here in this slide. The one on the bottom is a solid cover on an in-ground pool that's held down by water tubes. A couple of things we want to make sure of: if you are using a water tube cover, don't fill the water tubes too full, about 3/4 full. If they get too full and then they freeze, they're going to expand and break. We want to make sure to not pull the cover too tight. If you've got an in-ground pool like that, we want the cover to go across the deck, down the walls of the pool, across the water, because when it does rain or snow, we don't want the weight of that to pull the cover into the pool and defeat the whole purpose of the cover. So we want to make sure that it fits properly on the pool. And then if you've got an above ground pool on the top there, you can see that above ground pool cover. Sometimes people will put an air pillow in there, so all of the water on top, as we get rain, kind of diverts to one side of the pool where that can be pumped off with a cover pump. That kind of goes back to that question somebody asked earlier about all the rain that we get. We will want to keep that water pumped off of the cover if it gets too full. So from a water chemistry standpoint, solid covers are probably the best, because very little's getting into the pool to disrupt the pH, to disrupt the chlorine level, the amount of algicide that's in the water. The downside to solid covers, though, you get the pool on top of the pool, and you need to pay a little bit more attention to that. And then we do have some cover cleaners. The one thing to note here: if you keep a solar blanket on your pool during the summer, we definitely want to pull that off now and clean it. We do have a cleaner called Stowaway to clean solar blankets, and then when you pull your winter cover off next spring, to clean it as well so it doesn't mold and mildew. And then some of you may have a mesh cover. This is a mesh safety cover. And so especially if you've got small children, you're worried about them falling in the pool, these are great covers. They do look a little bit nicer. They are mesh, so they do allow rain and some fine debris in. So the chemicals from the winter kit may not last quite as long if you've got a mesh cover. So you may want to, maybe midwinter, bring a water sample, pull a corner of the cover back, bring a water sample into the store. Let's just check the water to make sure that we still have some chlorine in the water. And then finally, the last type of cover is an automatic cover. Some of you may have an automatic cover. I would recommend, check the water level, once a month. One of the things that, if you've got an automatic cover, typically the pool builders will not recommend the harsher climate winterization, or at least if you do the harsher climate winterization, don't use the automatic cover, because those are designed to be, the cover is supposed to lay on top of the water. If you lower the water level too low, that can put some stress on the cover. And then we'd also want to use a cover pump to pump off excess rainwater periodically as well. And then last but not least is, some people just choose not to cover the pool at all. I mean, the pool's kind of a showpiece in the backyard. They like to keep it open. That's perfectly fine. Just keep an eye on the water level. Vacuum the pool as needed, because any debris that gets into the pool could leave some stains throughout the winter. So a little bit more maintenance involved. You want to be able to vacuum the pool periodically, and definitely check the sanitizer level and pH level on a monthly basis, because the winterization products that we put in are not going to last nearly as long if we leave the pool uncovered. Any questions on covers? Anything else that we've covered? Because we kind of covered the majority of things in basically about 35 minutes. So those are the different types of covers. Again, kind of one last thought: make sure we don't close the pool too soon. Make sure if you've got any existing issues with the pool, like algae or cloudy water, let's fix those now. They're going to tend to get a little bit worse over the winter. So we want to get the pool as clean and clear as possible, so that when you open up that pool next spring, it is crystal clear. Maybe you need to do a little of the pool to get any fine debris out, but it's basically ready to go next spring. Tony, anything you want to add?
I just a couple things. Just emphasis too on filter cleaning. That is a process that can kind of get the way. But that is super important, especially as you have high expectations. You've shut it down, you've covered it up, you've chemically treated, you've done all those things in the correct order, and you have high expectations in the spring that you're going to open it up and it's going to be ready to jump right in. One of those, just those real hidden things is your filter, particularly if you have a sand filter. Number one, every 5 years you should be replacing that filter media. But just make sure you're diligent about chemically cleaning it before you hibernate it, because that'll just ensure that when you hook everything again in the spring, that thing's going to be filtering well, flowing well, and just meeting your expectations. And it's just less work you're going to have to do in the spring as well. So that will take the ease of the opening. So point there, and then just emphasis. I was talking to somebody today webinar, and they mentioned to me that they actually still had some algae issues that they've been struggling with all season. And I just emphasize that let's make sure that we take care of that. Let's put a plan in place and really be diligent and hands-on, because that is just something that we don't want to linger. We don't want to put it to bed a mess, if you will, and that's just going to lead to even more frustration in the spring. So yeah, I just echoing that last slide there. That's just, it's possible that we get chatty and forget to ask some of those simple questions of even how does it look now. And so make sure you let us know if you're still struggling with those things.
And don't hesitate to call. I put the Pool and Spa House phone number on there. That's their website. They've got some great information on their website, and they've got a store in Gresham, Selwood, Tigard, and Vancouver, and they've got some well-trained people in the stores that can really help you with any questions that you have. And there are no dumb questions. Don't hesitate to call.
Randy, another question that's just popped up: if you have a sand pump or a sand filter, how would we drain the water level down? What position in the multi-port valve would we use?
So that's Tony, I'll turn that one over to you. That's more of the pump filter stuff's more your expertise.
Yeah. So I guess a pool, if it's an above ground, and you have a sand filter, a lot of people will maybe they'll put backwash or waste, and the water level gets right to the skimmer level, and then turn it off and disconnect the hoses, and you'll lose the right there at the skimmer level. Some of these above ground, we didn't give details to some of these different styling. If you have an above ground pool, a lot of quick, easy set sort of pool don't really have a legitimate squared mouth skimmer that you'd find your pool level. You just have openings, if you will, kind of mid pool height. And so if that's the case, give you plugs for those inlet holes, if you will, to plug those. So at that point, you really don't need to drain the water too far below of the pool level. But let me go back to the question here so I don't get off track. Water, if you just have those two little openings on the side of the pool about halfway up, you really don't need much pressure over it. But if you do have a square mouth skimmer mounted to the side of your level, just drain it enough to where it's just barely creeping over the edge of your skimmer. Then at that point, you can shut off your and just drain what residual water is left kind of out the side of your skimmer onto the ground, or you could use off. If you have a in-ground pool, again, you backwash function, and that would drain the water level down. You could then, if you have valves that you can shut off your skimmers, you can shut off your skimmers, close them up so you're not sucking air and causing your pump to cavitate, and you can just draw from the main drain at that point. You can lower your water level a little further from that point. Any more questions at the store level if your question's not getting answered specifically? Customer has just given some input here. Typically drained and remove my sand filter against freezing. Perfect. Is that being overly 13,000 gallon above ground pool? Not at all. It suggests that once you've lowered the water level and you've disconnected, there's drain plugs on your, like Randy had that slide showing the drain plug in the water out of your pump filter, and if you can, stow it away in a dry, sheltered environment. That'll just help the equipment as well. Certainly a good idea.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Randy.
No, I would agree with that. That's definitely not being overly protective. That's exactly the way I would winterize it. That's probably that's what makes the above ground pools a little bit easier to do that with. It's a little tougher with an in-ground pool, but to be able to just disconnect the equipment, put it away, you don't have to worry about any freeze damage issues when you do it that way.
It's difficult. Maybe your equipment's under a deck or hard to reach or whatever, or it's just too heavy for you to. The main point there is to drain it. The multi-port valves also have a winterizing mode too that I would encourage you to utilize. So if you have questions about that, these are in the store, but the valve in position in the different settings, so it raises the plunger, if you will, up off of the base, and so it creates some a gap there, so things don't freeze and expand and mess up. So if you're going to leave it out, definitely put that a winterized mode, and not a bad idea to cover it. Any other questions? Good stuff.
Can you hear me?
I confirm that this is a method of option one, anything, but turn on filter when freezing as possible and use gizmo and strainer. This is my plan based on what I've learned. So Randy, you want to answer that?
Yeah, let me look at that. Let me look at that again.
I can speak to it as well, either way.
Yeah, no. So that's perfectly fine. If you turn the filter on when it's freezing as possible, you probably wouldn't even need to use a gizmo. So if the pump is running, the water is going to be running through the skimmer. You know, it would have to get super, super cold for that water in the skimmer to even freeze. And I guess if that happened, yeah, you'd want to put you wouldn't put a gizmo in there with the pump running. But if it was getting that cold, you might want to put maybe a quart bottle with some pea gravel that would float down in the skimmer, just in case that could prevent the freeze damage. But normally, just letting the pump run, we never typically get that cold of freeze that we'd have to worry about the water in the skimmer freezing. Just let it continue to run.
Yeah, agreed. Any other questions? Again, if some pop up later, feel free to just connect with us at the store. We'd love to chat and answer those questions in-house as well. So again, as a reminder, if you want to kind of revisit any of these slides of the presentation, we will be posting this on our YouTube page in the coming days. So those will be available as well. Thank you. I've seen a lot of thank yous post up here and just want to echo that. We thank you, Randy, for your time, and thank you everybody for hopefully get some good nuggets that will help you make sound decisions with your pool this off season.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
night.